Hello and welcome to Piano Technique Podcast with Jovan Hadjiđurić and Alan Fraser. I joined Alan in Belgrade where he was having a few days off. We talked about what he has been up to and about his future plans, about his new book. In addition to that, you will hear part of an interview conducted by Geoffrey Thomas, interview with Alan Fraser, where he asked him a few questions, and like I said, yes, we will hear part on this podcast today. If you are a new listener, you can find out more about Alan and his work at alanfraser.net or pianotechnique.net/Alan Fraser Institute, and also pianotechnique.org, where we upload Alan's lectures, ATMs, and actual piano lessons, and share them with the community.
Since October, I gave one institute in Paris, and it's actually kind of a strange situation because I actually left Paris on November 13th, which is the day those attacks happened. Arrived in Germany, went to a concert of Kemal Gekic in Stuttgart, and then we heard after the concert that these horrible events had taken place. That institute was very interesting because I have several people who are now involved in the accreditation program. They want to become craft piano teachers, and I had one guy, Mario, who explained to me how he's working with his kids completely differently now from before. He's decided to, instead of teaching them all the standard things you teach kids at the beginning, to just let them play however and let their spontaneous neuromotor system just find the best way. And he says they flop their hands down flat, and they lay their hands down just the way I like to describe babies lying around on the ground for a year with their bellies in contact with the floor. And then he says after a month or two, their hand spontaneously stands up into a really nice art structure. But it's important they didn't do it at the beginning. There was a certain period of acclimatization where they were going through an apprenticeship process. And when they do finally stand up, they do it a lot more naturally, and they do it with a lot less stress. It's a completely different quality of process at work here. So I was fascinated to hear that what I'm teaching is already beginning to have an effect on future generations of young pianists. That's really a large part of why I'm doing this, is to see that happen. So it's very gratifying. I heard Kemal play 5 more concerts after that first one in Stuttgart over the next few days, and we hung out and had some really marvelously stimulating conversations about the nature of musical content and why he feels that you can't be thinking about your ribs or your finger when you're playing music, and why I feel that yes, you're absolutely right, but in order for the fingers and the hands and the body to respond to the musical directives, there needs to be a knowledge of how to move there, and that needs to be developed through experience. So I'm working to bring even a more complete musical dovetailing. In other words, whatever I want the hand to do, I want the musical goal to be immediately apparent, so that my students fall less into the trap of thinking about how they're moving their finger, and more immediately shunting that physical process over to an intuitive sidebar, so to speak, in the brain, where you're basically thinking of a sound and your hand is giving you that sound. Now, there has to be a period of apprenticeship, and because we're adults, that has to be a relatively left brain intellectual apprenticeship, but I'm trying to shorten the process of apprenticeship so that immediately you feel you have a certain sound and your body is set up so that you can produce that sound. I'm going through that process myself. I'm still I'm still working on my technique. Every time I see Kemmel, we work, and new things develop. Right now, this sense of the body supporting the hand has gone to a completely new place, because he played this amazing program of Bach preludes and fugues interspersed with Liszt transcendental etudes. And he linked them all up by key. And it's a brilliant program. He played all the Bach with no pedal, and you would never know it because the sonority was so rich and so singing, but the counterpoint was so clear. It was a tour de force. And he told me it was incredibly difficult to do. It's not like walking a tightrope, he said. It's like walking a tight thread, like this tiny little barely visible thread, which it's amazingly easy to fall off at any moment. But what he got by staying on that thread was this impeccable clarity and a richness of expression which I've never heard brought to these Bach pieces. And they affected the way he played the transcendentals. Many of the transcendentals were played with a lot less pedal as well, and we heard much more of the polyphonic content. We don't think of the transcendental etudes as having polyphonic content, but there's lots in there, and it really makes the structure of the piece and the emotional impact of the piece so much stronger than if you simply did this kind of bravura approach, which is the main approach that we get. So I came home and I started practicing with no pedal, and I started teaching a lot of my students, just what can we achieve from playing with no pedal. And my hand has to stand up much, much more. I thought it was already standing up very well. But not only that, the triceps and biceps are, the sense that they're involved is much, much greater. The sense that my whole shoulder blade is involved is much greater, and even down into the musculature that's completely enveloping my rib cage. All that, I'm now more aware of how that conspires to help the hands do what they need to do on the keyboard. And I feel as soon as I press the pedal down now that there's this kind of an elastic joining of the hand all the way back through the arm into the body, and that elastic loosens as soon as the pedal is pressed down, because like the damper coming off the string is just like it's loosening the string, and it loosens. It's very strange phenomenon, but I'm learning oodles and oodles of things by not using the pedal at all and being totally strict, totally rigorous with myself. And he went through the same process as he prepared these Bach preludes and fugues, and found it incredibly rich. So there's a new opening. And this is sort of what I love about what I'm doing, is that there always seems to be a new opening. So you never get stale, you never feel like you're just repeating the same old shtick, even though, it's always about the arch of the hand, and it's always about, as soon as there's any falling, oh yeah, that's the other thing, as soon as you take off the pedal, then if there's any trace of the falling sensation, which is the trademark of arm weight technique, then you immediately feel it. The pedal masks a lot of that. So it's really great microscope is using no pedal. So that's more or less what I've been up to. I've on the publishing front, there's a French translation of Honing the Pianistic Self-Image, which is coming out soon. That will be, and I had to spend a month correcting the French translation, because the way I use words is somewhat individual, and it's really easy for translators to get the wrong idea. So Eveline Siazinski, my French translator, did a great job. I was really, really happy with it. The French, I can feel my own speaking. I can feel my own use of language, my own style in the French that she wrote. But there were certain details that were just mistranslated. So I spent a lot of time on that. I'm still working on getting the fourth book into publishable shape. My editor now feels that maybe I should use sidebars, so this is a whole new issue. So I've often noticed that editing a book takes longer than writing it, and this is turning out to be the case for this fourth volume, Playing the Piano with Your Whole Self, as well as for my previous volumes. I'm giving an institute in Montreal, but not Montreal, Canada, Montreal, France. There's a little village called Montreal, which is the old French for Mount Royal, in Burgundy. And I'll be there from, I think, January 20th to the 24th. And then no more institutes until the end of March. So what else has been new? I think that's about it in terms of the latest news.
Good. And we have a question from user Shifty Oliver.
Mm-hmm.
And do you want to read it, or maybe it's better if you read it?
I have focal dystonia. I wonder if Alan would have any suggestions for exercises that could be done as treatment. Grasping with all the fingers, standing, then rolling over to have considerably decreased the dystonia. Yeah. Well, I've already answered this question on the forum. There's an entire chapter on dystonia in my new book. And there's a rolling exercise. There's a version of that online somewhere with a Japanese pianist from Montreal. But I can't really remember the URL. If you just do a search, you might come up with it somehow. But basically, dystonia for me is it's a message from the central nervous system saying, listen, we need something to happen that's not happening. So basically, let's say a dystonia is an uncontrollable extension of a finger. So to my mind, that's the neuromotor system saying, listen, you don't have a good hand arch. Your hand arch is a mess. It's like falling down. It's collapsing in the middle. And the extension of the one finger is an attempt to pull that hand arch up into its viable shape and viable functionality. Or else you have a finger that's curling uncontrollably. It's the same thing. Flexion is the action which creates a viable, potent hand arch. But if you're not flexing and growing your hand arch, then the CNS eventually goes into almost spasm and saying, help, I got to try to do this. And then it's unfortunately picking one isolated finger action and doing it not to move a key, but just to try to get that hand arch up. So why did you find the grasping and the rolling exercises useful? Because you are now bringing the stimulation, the actions, the neuromotor sensory patterns of creating a hand arch to your whole hand. So the more the whole hand starts doing it, then the less that one isolated finger feels it's got to carry the brunt of the effort. And if you take this logic far enough, you can completely get rid of the dystonia. But you have to figure out how not to use the weight of your arm anymore, but to stand the hand up. If I feel the weight of my arm allowing my hand to stand better, then that's great. But mostly we use the weight of the arm to somehow pull the hand down out of its viable, potent arch structure, and that's where the trouble lies.
At this point, Alan also wanted to talk about the question he received and answered a while ago on pianotechnique.org, and it was about the importance of music and technique and what comes first, technique or music.
Just this question about music, is that picking up anything?
Oh yeah, I think it is. Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. This question about technique and musicianship.
Let me get it. Serious.
No, I mean, yeah. There doesn't have to be a specific question. It's just something that's always on my mind, and I get asked about it a lot.
What comes first? Yeah.
What comes first, technique or
musicianship?
musicianship?
Music and how effective it is. If somebody understands music, what technique follow?
Yeah. So my new book is called Playing the Piano with Your Whole Self. And if your technique is at all faulty, then there will be what Moshe Feldenkrais called parasitic contractions in your body. be it in your hand, your wrist, your arm, your shoulder, your torso, your hip joints. It could be anywhere or in any number of places like that. Parasitic contractions are contractions that block movement. They are an attempt to help movement happen, but because you're not well aligned, they have the wrong result. They have the opposite result. Now, muscular tonus is also holding, but that's the muscular holding that keeps joints snug, that keeps bones well enough connected that they can move well. So tonus is a completely different phenomenon from tension and parasitic contraction. So let's say you really believe that you have to be thinking about music and you can't be thinking about all this physical stuff because it's too much of a distraction. And you're right, but if you're thinking about music and you're full of parasitic contraction, you're not going to get the result you want. So, unfortunately, the work that we're doing here is largely, going back into physical organization. Not because we don't want to think about music, but because we want to empower our musicianship. A self that's free from parasitic contraction is a self that can express itself fully, musically, emotionally, dramatically, lyrically, tenderly, whatever. You've got to have all of yourself available for the artistic experience if you want it to be a profound artistic expression. And for that, you need to lower the amount of parasitic contraction in your system. So that kind of describes the play, the two criteria that we play off of each other. We're always trying to go back to music, but we're always also trying to figure out how to do it more effectively by reducing the amount of stress within the system. Not through relaxation, but through effective activation. So maybe that's enough to say about that at this particular point in time.
And now the interview question, how do you practice?
That's an awfully big question. Basically, I practice to establish a link between what I perceive in terms of the musical content and how I might go about making that musical content sound. So often I'll do my first practice away from the piano. I'll sit with the score and I'll read the score and try to imagine what this music might mean. I'll look at the architectonic structure. I'll look at which themes are, interacting in what way and where the harmonic structure is going. So I'll try to get a picture of the piece in my head, which is completely unrelated to any sense of, there's a technical difficulty here. This is very important to establish because too often we go to the piano, we start, and immediately we feel technical difficulties, and then the whole experience of the piece is associated eternally with this initial technical difficulty. And it should be the other way around. So you want the musical content and what the music is speaking to take precedence. Now, when I get to the piano, then of course I'll generally start with a warm-up because having established all the ways I have of approaching the piano and the structure of the hand and the function of the hand and how it's moving, generally my old reflexes are still in my brain and in my body. So if I don't attend to what I teach everybody else, I will not do it myself. So I constantly have to give my own body, my own reflexes, my own senses refresher experiences. So I'll do warm-ups. I'll do all sorts of warm-ups. I'll rub my hand on the thighs and then bring the hand slowly to the piano and maybe do silent glissandos on the keyboard.
What's the purpose of that?
is to awaken the sensory experience of the hand, so that the richer the actual sensory input, the stimulation of the skin on the underside of the hand, changes the state of the musculature within the hand. It gives the neuromotor system a different sense of where the bones are in the hand and how the musculature is interacting with that bony structure. And it makes it more alive. The more you can sense yourself, the more the senses can inform how you're moving. And the more your hand feels like a movable entity that's from within, movable from within, rather than a fixed block. Now, we tend to perceive our hand as a fixed block. We don't realize that the metacarpal bones, for instance, the fifth metacarpal can fold almost all the way to the thumb metacarpal. Mm-hmm. So, and then you can make it very flat. So and even the second and third metacarpals can rise and fall in relation to one another. There's a certain degree of flexibility in there, and the more those bones inside the hand are perceived as being movable almost as much as the fingers and the thumb, then the more the hand becomes like a jellyfish, like a medusa, like a breathing entity. And so the more, when I want to galvanize the hand into the action, that it's going to be action rather than a confirming of some static structure. And so I prime the reflexes, I prime all the responsive capacity of the hand. So this rubbing the hand on the thighs or on the keyboard or on whatever surface is in a way it recalls the baby who crawls for a year before standing up, and the belly is getting constant stimulation from the mother or from the ground or whatever. And without this actual sensory stimulation, the sense of self would not be the same. The baby's sense of self comes from a sensory experience of its own body. So this wakes up the hand, and then I'll go to perhaps lying the hand flat and then drawing the flattened tips of the fingers towards the heel of the hand to bring the hand up into its arch structure, but in a way where I can feel all the muscles of my arm participating. I can feel the extensors pulling my hand back, cocking the hand, priming the hand. I can feel the flexors underneath the arm, I wouldn't say tightening, I would say moving, contracting, mm-hmm. creating a sense of dynamism within the hand itself, and that goes all the way up to the shoulder. Then I might turn my hand into a bird beak and just stand on one note, and try not to compress the note. When I say stand on one note, that one thing means a huge amount, because to stand up, as I would get out of this chair and stand up, I do not press the ground. I do not push down on the floor to stand up. My body, basically like a pair of scissors, it just unfolds. And there I am vertical. So this process of standing, getting out of a chair is, as Moshe Feldenkrais would say, making peace with gravity. Mm-hmm. You don't struggle to get out of the chair. You don't half fall down to get out of the chair. Making peace with gravity means that the forces within you bringing you to verticality, and the forces of gravity informing you in which direction verticality is, those forces harmonize. So I come here, I make my hand into a bird beak, or just bunch 1, 2, and 3 together, and I boom, and I plop it into the key in a way where the key does not go all the way to the key bed. It may touch the key bed, but then I instantly feel like there's a layer of synovial fluid between the bottom of the key and the key bed. So I'm instantly, because then I'm in a state, then that reassures me, or that ensures that I'm in a state of unstable equilibrium. Because there's such a strong tendency to let the weight of the arm bear into the key and create a compression, which then goes back through the whole system and makes my hand resist. So if I can get to the key and tap it and go to the bottom of the key, but then instantly feel like, oh, I'm floating. My finger still has contact with the key, but I'm weightless. Then I have a completely different relation to the key. The key actually maintains its three-dimensionality. I continue to perceive it as a three-dimensional entity.
And that would be it for today's episode. Check out alanfraser.net for more of Alan's work, and pianotechnique.org for his videos, lessons, and lectures. Thank you.